The moonlight fell on Buckskin like a long silver scar across the desert. The wind that
I've been
night
meaning
was
to talk
cold
to you.
and stinging, carrying the smell of dust and alcohol from the tavern at the end of the street. But in the rotting wooden house on the edge of town, the smell was stronger than anything else. Blood. Elena Hartfield sank to her knees on the ground, her thin arms wrapped tightly around the newborn baby. Her face was pale, her tangled hair soaked with sweat and blood. Outside, her two little girls, one 6, the other 4, hunkered down in a corner, their eyes filled with tears as they looked at their mother. The door swung open. Heavy boots thudded against the floor. Samuel Hartfield, her husband, appeared, reeking of alcohol, his eyes red. Another daughter? His voice roared like thunder in the cramped room. Elena swallowed, softly saying, It's a girl, a little angel." His large hand slammed into her cheek, dry and cold. She fell back, her lips split open, blood running down her chin. "Useless. 3 daughters in a row. You're just giving birth to a burden." Samuel screamed, kicking the chair over, then grabbing the wine bottle and smashing it on the table, sending shards flying. Elena trembled and hugged the newborn baby, her body shielding her. The other 2 children burst into sobs, but the crying only made his rage flare up more violently. He rushed forward, yanking Elena's hand, trying to pull the baby from her mother's arms. "Enough. If you can't give birth to a son, you and them don't deserve to live." At that moment, a gunshot ripped through the night. The bullet hit the ground, inches from Samuel's feet. He stopped, his breathing quickening. The whole house shook with the sound of intervention. From the darkness, a man stepped in. Tall, broad-shouldered, his dusty ash-colored coat. His eyes were cold and deep, as if he had seen too much loss. It was Rhett Lawson, a widower who lived quietly on the farm outside Buckskin. He stood in the doorway, his gun lowered, but his eyes never leaving Samuel. "Enough!" His voice rang out, deep and firm, like a sentence. Samuel narrowed his eyes and growled, "This is my wife. It's none of your business, Lawson." Rhett took another step forward, his voice even clearer. "Wife? Do you consider her a wife when every blow makes her a slave? If it's a crime to have daughters in Buckskin, then I'll raise them. And I'll raise them with pride." The air in the house froze. Rhett's words fell sharper than the bullet he had just fired. Elena looked up, her eyes swollen from the whip, trembling involuntarily. She had never heard a man say those words, not mocking, not contemptuous, but with determination. Samuel staggered, growling, but he made no move. His arms shook, his eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route. Outside, a few townspeople had gathered, heard the shots, seen the scene through the open door. Their silence hung like an unspoken sentence over him. Elena felt her heart pounding in her chest. Hot blood trickled down her neck, but her hands still held her 3 daughters tight. When her eyes met Rhett's, a glimmer of light flared in the darkness of despair. That Buckskin night, there was no need for a second shot. One declaration, one person who dared to stand up, had changed the fate of the 4 of them. Elena Hartfield sat silently in Rhett Lawson's old carriage. The wheels creaked and shook on the bumps of the dirt road leading out of Buckskin. The night sky was ashen gray, the smell of desert dust mixed with the faint scent of colostrum from the baby in her arms. Her 2 older daughters huddled against her sides, their wide eyes still filled with fear from the old house. She wanted to believe in the safety ahead, but doubt was like a thorn in her heart. Before her eyes, the man with broad shoulders and a calm demeanor was just a stranger. A stranger who had shot at her husband, then declared that he would raise her daughters with pride. But why? Men here never did anything carefree. Elena spoke softly, her voice hoarse. "You take us away? What do you want?" Rhett did not turn around, his hands still firmly holding the reins. "I don't want anything. I just can't stand the sight of a woman who has just given birth taking the beatings of her own child." Elena laughed dryly, the laugh of someone who is used to lies. "Nothing is given for free. I've lived long enough to know that men only reach out when they want something." Rhett was silent for a long time. The lantern in the carriage cast distinct shadows and light on his face, making his haggard features even sadder. Then he slowly replied, "Perhaps you're right about most men. But I've lost everything a man could call a family. My wife and my only son. Since the day I buried them under the white cottonwood tree, I've had nothing left to keep. Perhaps helping you isn't about taking, but about reminding me that kindness isn't dead in this land." Elena paused. For a moment she caught his eyes in the car mirror. No alcohol, no desire, just genuine loss. But memories of the past pulled her back. At 15, Elena was the only daughter of a poor blacksmith. Her father, who had always wanted a son to carry on the family business, married her to Samuel Hartfield, the son of a wealthy lumberman. "He is strong and has a future," her father had said. "You will not suffer like your mother." On their wedding day, Samuel gave her a bouquet of wildflowers and a warm smile. Elena believed it was the beginning of happiness. But a few months later, that smile turned to constant drunkenness. And when their first daughter was born, his eyes changed. From expectation to disappointment, from disappointment to contempt. "I want a boy, not a girl," Samuel had hissed on a winter night as Elena shivered by the fire with her child. After that, each time she gave birth to another daughter, the beatings became more severe. Before one bruise could heal, another would appear. Worse, the town fell silent. The neighbors knew, but no one interfered. For them, it was not unusual for a man to discipline his wife with his fists. Elena learned to endure. She told herself, just survive, just protect the children. But by the third child, she knew she was exhausted. The neighing of a horse interrupted her reminiscence. The carriage stopped in front of an old but sturdy wooden house, leaning against a low hill. Yellow light poured out from the window, mingling with the warm smell of kitchen smoke. Rhett got out first, holding out his hand. "You can come in. There is warm water, there is food. Tonight, at least let the children sleep without cowering in fear." Elena remained still, holding the child tightly, her eyes following his every move. "Why me?" she asked softly, as if talking to herself. Rhett looked up, his voice calm. "Because I don't want to see another little grave in Buckskin tomorrow because of a man too drunk to appreciate his wife and children." She choked, feeling as if the hard shell of years was cracking. Finally, when her eldest daughter tugged on her sleeve and whispered, "Mommy, I'm scared. I want to stay here," Elena shakily stepped down, placing her fragile hand in Rhett's. For the first time in years, she wasn't being pulled, wasn't being jerked, wasn't being ordered around. She was simply accepted. The first morning at the Lawson farm opened with pale yellow sunlight streaming through the window. Elena woke with a start on the simple wooden bed. The thick blankets and the strange smell of pine made her feel like she was dreaming. Beside her, the two little girls were curled up together like kittens, while the newborn baby was still sleeping peacefully in a makeshift cradle made of an old grain basket covered with a few layers of soft cloth by Rhett. Elena tiptoed outside. Before her eyes, a completely different world appeared. A large farm with a long wooden fence, the smell of hay and the neighing of horses in the stable. Rhett was there, his shirt rolled up to reveal his sunburned arms, his strong hands tying up the hay. He only glanced when he saw her, then continued his work, without a word of greeting. The silence made Elena tense. For Samuel, silence was always a sign before a violent storm. She tugged at the hem of her shirt, telling herself, "Don't trust anyone. Don't give your heart again." The following days were a series of unpleasant challenges. Elena had to learn how to work on a real farm, milking cows, making fires, cooking with unfamiliar ingredients. One time, a pot of beans on the stove burned. Elena panicked, hugged her child, and ran out into the yard, afraid that she would be yelled at. But Rhett just walked over, picked up the pot, and calmly said, "I'll show you how next time. It's okay." That calm answer made Elena even more confused. He didn't blame her, didn't get angry. That calmness was more alien to her than violence. The challenges came not only from work, but also from the eyes of the town. Every time Elena followed Rhett into Buckskin to buy things, whispers hissed behind her back. The woman left her husband. She gave birth to 3 daughters, and now she's following the widow Lawson. Elena gritted her teeth, hugging her children closer while Rhett just walked silently beside her, never responding. One afternoon, as she was busy with the wood, Rhett approached. "You don't need to hear that," he said. Elena looked up, her voice bitter. "You don't understand. Here, women have no voice. They think I'm trash, and I used to believe it too." Rhett looked at her for a long time, his gray eyes shining with determination. "If they think so, let them think. But I don't believe it, and the children shouldn't believe it either." Elena was still suspicious, though. One evening, after putting the children to bed, she walked out onto the porch where Rhett was carving a piece of wood with a small knife. "Why did you really do all this?" she asked, her voice trembling with both exhaustion and confusion. He paused, his eyes fixed on the blade. "I used to wish someone would help my wife when she was in labor. But no one came. Now it's too late. Maybe helping you is my way of repaying that debt to life." Elena was silent. She didn't know whether to believe or laugh. The past had taught her that every kindness had a price. But when she looked at Rhett's rough hands, she saw that they bore the marks of labor, not trickery. The biggest test came one moonlit night. While Elena was rocking her baby, there was a loud knock on the door. A neighbor brought a bottle of wine, laughing loudly. "Lawson, why are you hiding that woman? Just throw it back to her husband, no problem." Elena was stunned, but Rhett just opened the door, standing in front. "She and the children are my guests," he said, his voice as sharp as a knife. "Whoever dares to touch them will have to step over my dead body first." The other man paused, then mumbled and walked away. Elena watched the scene, her heart filled with mixed emotions. Part of her still trembled with fear, while another part of her felt a vague hope. Maybe he really wasn't like other men, but that made her doubt herself even more. She didn't dare to believe, because she was afraid that if she believed again, and was wrong, her heart would no longer have the strength to recover. That night, lying next to her children, Elena quietly asked herself, "Can I believe in a man who has lost everything? Can I believe that I am still worthy of being loved?" In that warm wooden house, the challenge was not only in the hard work or the eyes outside, but in her heart, the constant battle between fear and the desire to live as a real human being. Nights at the Lawson farm were usually quiet. The wind blew through the cracks in the door, carrying the smell of hay and the sound of horses' hooves in the stables. But Elena was not used to this quiet. She had lived through long nights filled with curses and rough hands. Now, when everything calmed down, she felt uneasy, as if the storm would return at any moment. One evening, a sudden rainstorm began. The old roof creaked and water leaked from the corner of the kitchen. Elena hurried to catch the water in a bucket, staggering with her baby in her arms. Rhett appeared, holding a tarp. "Let me," he said. Before she could protest, Rhett climbed onto the roof, his muscular body visible in the lightning. Elena stood below, his shirt soaked and clinging to her slender skin, his hands tightly holding the baby. When Rhett jumped down, the rain splashed, his shirt sticking to his hard muscles. Their eyes met. Elena turned quickly, her heart pounding. She had never seen a man who did something without giving orders, without asking, just simply helping. That night, after putting the children to sleep, she walked out into the main room. The fire in the fireplace cast a golden glow on Rhett's face as he sat carving a small piece of wood. Elena paused, then asked softly, "What are you going to do with it?" Rhett looked up, his eyes softening. "A doll. For the little girl. I remember my wife doing it for our son." Elena sat down opposite. There was a long silence, only the sound of the knife scraping against the wood. She looked at his hands, rough, calloused, but as they carefully carved each line, they became strangely gentle. A warmth spread through her chest. In the following days, the closeness grew from small things. As she worked on sewing, Rhett stood behind her, gently holding her hand to guide each stitch. The warm breath on the back of Elena's neck made her shiver. Her fingers slipped, almost tearing the fabric. She quickly pulled back, her face red. Rhett just smiled slightly, saying nothing. One morning, while Rhett was teaching the two older children to fly kites, Elena stood on the porch looking out. The sun shone on his face, a rare smile blooming as the little girl cheered as the kite flew high. She tightened her grip on her scarf, whispering, "If all of this were true, would my life be different?" Another night, after the fire had died down, Elena couldn't sleep. She heard the soft sound of a guitar coming from the stable. The music was slow, sad, but warm. She stepped out onto the porch, gently opening the door. The silver moonlight fell. Rhett sat alone, his hands gently tapping each string. The melody made her chest tighten. "Do you still remember how to play for your wife?" Elena asked, her voice hesitant. Rhett looked up, his eyes filled with the past. "I play for myself, but maybe tonight for you too." Elena fell silent. She felt his eyes pierce the defenses she had built over the years. In that moment, she no longer felt abandoned, but a woman. Seen. The alcohol made her step closer. When his hand gently touched hers to place it on the strings, Elena shivered. Skin to skin, a jolt of electricity ran down her spine. She flinched back reflexively, but he didn't hold her. Just let the silence fill her. "You don't have to be afraid," Rhett whispered. Elena looked up, her eyes watering. She wanted to say something, but her throat was tight. In the end, she just nodded. That night, she slept beside her children, but in her dreams, those rough hands were still warm on hers. And for the first time in years, Elena dreamed not of nightmares, but of a new beginning. Rumors spread like wildfire in Buckskin. Just weeks after Elena and her children had been staying at Lawson's farm, whispers began to spread. That woman ran off with the widow Rhett. She gave birth to 3 useless daughters, and now she's stuck on the farm to eat. Elena's just using her cheap looks to win Lawson's trust. These vicious words crept into every corner of the tavern, every market day. Elena heard them every time she went into town to buy rice, heard them even when no one dared to say it out loud. She bit her lip and kept silent, but her teary eyes betrayed everything. One afternoon, as she was mowing the yard, a strange man rode up on horseback. He was Calvin Moore, a hired gun who had been close to Samuel Hartfield. Calvin sneered, his voice clear enough for the young men gathered nearby to hear. "Elena Hartfield, I'm not surprised to see you here. A widow and a deserted woman, what a perfect match. Did you switch from your old bed to a new one to get some peace?" The whole market square fell silent, and then burst into soft laughter. Elena was stunned, her face red with humiliation. Rhett was loading the cart. Hearing this, he stepped out, his eyes sharp. "Enough, Calvin." But the other man just shrugged. "I'm just saying what everyone thinks. No one believes a weak woman would live in your house without repaying her in some other way." Those dirty words were like a knife stabbing straight into Elena. She trembled, her hands clutching the hem of her dress, wanting to scream and protest, but her throat was tight. Rhett pulled her away, leaving the laughter behind, but Elena's heart was broken. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Elena confronted Rhett by the fireplace. "Why did you let them talk like that? Why didn't you deny it in front of everyone?" Her voice choked. Rhett slowly replied, "With that kind of person, denying it only makes them happier. I think silence will keep you more peaceful." "Peaceful?" Elena laughed bitterly. "You don't understand. I've lived my whole life under the scorn. Now I've added the name clingy woman. I can't take it anymore." That night, she cried alone on the doorstep. In despair, Elena thought about leaving, taking the children away from both men. One a tyrant, one a kind man who couldn't save her from the scorn. Tragedy struck sooner than she expected. 2 days later, Samuel appeared with several gunmen blocking the farmhouse gate. He shouted so that the whole town could hear. "Elena is my wife. Lawson seduced, hid, and dishonored the Hartfield family. I have come to reclaim what is mine." The slander was like thunder from the blue sky. The people came, curious and eager. They looked at Elena as if she were a sinner. She stood behind the door, her hands trembling, holding her children in her arms. The 3 children's eyes were round and frightened. Rhett stepped out to face them, but Samuel had already planted doubts in everyone's minds. "Elena left because she was beaten," Rhett said loudly. "She sought refuge, not for adultery." Samuel laughed. "Who would believe that? A woman in a widow's house with her children. If there was no evil, why hide it? The crowd was in an uproar. For the first time, Elena saw Rhett's kindness as evidence against them. She wanted to scream, to tell the truth, but the slander was like an invisible chain. If she opened her mouth, she was afraid her children would suffer more cruel words. The old fear tightened her mind. I can never win. That night, Elena wrote a short letter and left it on the table. In the letter, she apologized to Rhett and said she would leave before things got worse. Before dawn, she quietly carried her youngest child and led her 2 older children out onto the dusty road. With each step, her heart felt like it was breaking into pieces. She had no idea that this decision would lead to the biggest confrontation of her life. Dawn had cast a deep red hue over the town of Buckskin, heralding an unusual day. Since early morning, the people had gathered in front of the small wooden courthouse, chattering loudly. The news of Samuel Hartfield suing Rhett Lawson for wife stealing had spread far and wide. For many, it was a rare opportunity to witness the downfall of a woman who had dared to defy her husband. Elena sat in the courtroom, her cold hands clasped together. Her 3 daughters clung to her legs, their eyes wide with fear. Rhett sat beside them, his broad shoulders shielding them, his gaze as calm as a mountain of stone. The door swung open. Samuel strode in, his gait arrogant, followed by 2 gunmen and Calvin Moore. He wore a long coat, his hair matted with sweat, and his mouth curled up when he saw Elena. "You treacherous woman," he roared. "Today I will take back what is mine." The judge banged his gavel, his voice stern. "Order. This court is under the law of the land. Samuel Hartfield, what are you accusing?" Samuel stood up, feigning indignation. "That man seduced my wife, kept her in the house without permission. I am here to reclaim my honor and my rights as a husband." A murmur arose. Some nodded, others looked at Elena with pity and contempt. Rhett stood up, his voice calm but firm. "Your Honor, if I am guilty, it is only that I opened the door to a beaten mother. If I am a robber, I took away the punches, the bruises, and the tears of these 3 children. If the law calls that a crime, then I plead guilty." The room fell silent. Elena looked up at him, her heart aching. But Samuel did not stop. He pointed at her, his voice hissing. "You dare deny it? Elena, tell me. You were in his house, ate his food, slept under his roof. Isn't the evidence clear enough?" Elena trembled, cold sweat running down her temples. All eyes were on her. Memories of being beaten, locked up, and cursed flooded back. She was afraid and wanted to stay silent like all those years. But then, her youngest daughter's small hand tightly gripped hers. "Mother, don't be afraid," she whispered. A fire flared up in her chest. Elena slowly stood up. Her voice was trembling at first, then gradually became stronger. "I wasn't robbed. I was beaten until I bled while still holding the newborn baby. I was called useless because I gave birth to a girl. I was locked in a dark house, not allowed to read books, not allowed to speak. That wasn't marriage. That was prison." A commotion arose. Samuel blushed and growled. "You're lying. You just want to humiliate me in front of the town." Elena raised her head, her eyes blazing. "I didn't humiliate you. You did it yourself a long time ago. I'm not anyone's property. I'm the mother of these 3 girls, and I choose to live where they're called miracles, not burdens." The crowd fell silent. Then suddenly, a thin figure stood up with a cane. It was Agnes Whitfield, the town's oldest librarian. Her voice was shaky but clear. "Joanna Monroe was once called a piece of trash. Now Elena Hartfield. But I saw her teach my daughter to read. I saw her tell stories to the children in the square. She's not an object, she's an example." Several other women stood up too. The grocer's wife, the young teacher, even the inn's cook. They told each other that Elena had helped them, had encouraged their daughters, had shown them that women were more than just bowing their heads. The atmosphere turned. Samuel turned pale and shouted, "You are all bewitched. Women are born to serve their husbands, to give birth to sons." As soon as he finished speaking, Rhett stepped forward, his eyes shining like fire. He did not draw his gun, but threw the forging hammer to the ground, the metal clanging loudly. "Then listen carefully, Samuel. Under my roof, no child is a burden, no woman is a slave. If you want to regain power with your fists, you will have to step over my dead body." Cheers erupted from the back of the room. The people who had been silent now began to clap their hands and stamp their feet. The judge banged his gavel. "Order! The territorial court has ruled. Elena Hartfield does not belong to Samuel Hartfield. She is free to choose her place of residence and guardian. All charges against Rhett Lawson are dismissed." The hammer fell like thunder. The crowd roared. No laughter this time. Only applause and weeping. Elena collapsed, tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of relief. Samuel was dragged out, screaming in despair. Rhett turned, silently extending his rough hand to Elena. She took it, no longer trembling. In the bright light of noon, amid the noise of the town, they had chosen each other, not in secret but openly, with honor. Spring had brought new color to Buckskin. After months of drought, the first rains of the season had made the earth bloom. On the Lawson farm, the old apple tree by the stables was in full bloom for the first time, its petals falling like late snow. Elena stood under the tree, wearing a simple muslin dress she had sewn herself. No silk, no fancy lace, just soft, clean fabric, a symbol of a new beginning. In her hair, her 3 daughters pinned wildflowers from the meadow. She smiled as they chirped like baby birds, their little hands carefully adjusting each petal. Rhett Lawson waited ahead. He was not wearing a formal suit, just his familiar cowboy clothes, clean and neat. In his hand was a small wooden box. Inside were 2 silver rings he had forged himself, the metal gleaming in the sunlight. The town had not invited anyone, but people had come in droves. Mrs. Whitfield sat in the front row, leaning on her cane, her eyes shining with pride. The shopkeeper's wife, the young teacher, the women who had stood up for Elena were all there, bringing bread, cider, and wildflowers. Even a few of the men who had previously sneered came, silent but with softened faces, as if to make up for their cowardly silence. As Elena stepped forward, Rhett held out his hand. It was rough and calloused, but she no longer felt afraid. She placed her hand in it, feeling the warmth spread like the pulse of the earth. Her voice trembled but was firm. "Once upon a time, I believed that my life had only one path, to endure. I thought having a daughter was a sin, that I was unworthy of being loved. But today, I know I was wrong. I don't live just to survive. I live to love, to teach my children that they are miracles, not burdens." Rhett bowed his head, his eyes shining with a rare tenderness. "As for me, I had lost everything. I thought life was all about pain. But then Elena came, with 3 little girls like 3 little candles. They lit up my house, and you lit up my heart. It wasn't me who saved you, it was you who saved me." He opened the box, handed her the silver ring. Elena tremblingly placed the other one in his hand. There was applause. Apple blossom petals fell, touching their hair like a blessing. After the ceremony, the whole farm turned into a small party. Hot bread, fragrant roast meat, cider passed around. Children ran around, laughter ringing. Elena looked at her children, 3 bright faces, laughing without restraint for the first time. Rhett sat next to her, tilted his head slightly and whispered, "You were afraid that love would only bring wounds. But you see, love can also heal." Elena leaned on his shoulder, tears of happiness falling. "And I know, this time I made the right choice." The sun was setting. The sky was orange. Elena, Rhett, and the children stood under the apple tree, hand in hand. They didn't need fancy vows, they didn't need a grand chapel. They just needed to know that, after all, this was a real family. A family built on respect, honor, and love. As the last rays of sunlight touched her hair, Elena whispered to herself, "I am no longer the woman who was beaten for giving birth to a daughter. I am a mother, a wife, and I am Elena Hartfield." In the sound of the wind blowing white flowers, she knew she had finally stepped out of the darkness to begin a warm life that she and her children deserved. Short message: Elena Hartfield had proven that women are not property, not defined by whether they give birth to a son or a daughter. A daughter is a pride, not a burden. And true love is not about possessing, but about protecting, respecting, and lifting each other up after the darkness. Happiness is not given, but is something we courageously choose.